Well, good day, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Mitch Ashley, and I'm excited to be here with you with our DevOps Unbound Roundtable. My co-host, Alan Schimmel, is landing his plane right at the moment, getting connected, so he'll probably join us as we get things going here. We have a great topic today, but before I introduce that, I want to thank a couple of people. First, I'd like to thank Tricentis, who's been a fantastic sponsor of DevOps Unbound and really helped develop and shape the show and helps with a lot of our topics and just some really good people there that we enjoy working with. Of course, we want to thank both Cynthia Dunlop and John producers of the show. And speaking of co-hosts, magically from the technology of Boca Raton, Alan, welcome. Glad to have you here.
I don't know if I am here.
We see you.
Who am I? What am I doing here? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Thank you. Just some technical difficulties here.
That's all right. Once you take it here, I just did the start of the intro.
Sure. So guys, as Mitchell said, thanks for joining us on another live roundtable for DevOps Unbound, sponsored by our friends at Tricentis. We have a great, I'm hearing an echo. Is it just me, guys?
Just you, I think. Yeah.
Okay, I'll try to ignore it. We have a great panel lined up for us today to talk about, to me, what is one of the most important topics around DevOps, and that is the future of CI/CD. CI/CD is so integral to the DevOps mission. I once heard it put forth that DevOps is no more than the cure. CI/CD is the disease, and so I think it's important, because the other thing is, from when I first started DevOps.com 7 or 8 years ago and 9 years ago, CI/CD was CI/CD, emphasis on the CI, and I think what we've seen is a little bit of a switch on that, where it's become CI/CD, emphasis on the CD. And with that, we've seen a tremendous evolution in the role of CD and how it relates to CI and vice versa. Before I introduce our panel, though, I want to just talk a little bit about our Big Marker webinar system that we're using today and how that relates to you, our audience. I like Big Marker because I think it makes for a lot of interactivity. And we have a number of ways for you to interact with us today. I see many of you are already taking advantage of the chat function. And under chat, we have public chat, which is open to everyone here. We have presenters just for the presenters to back. And then you have private chat. Private chat is not some lots of fish in the sea kind of app. So don't use it to just harass people. But if you want to have a conversation with someone, you certainly can. We also have the QA section. And if you look under QA, we already have a question or a comment, perhaps, looking for an engaging sessions. And I'm not sure if we'll giveaways from this webinar. We do usually 4 Amazon gift cards, and we will pick 4 winners for that, if that's what you're referring to. But if you have a question for our panel, please put it in this Q&A area, because that's where we'll recognize it from, and I can present it to the whole panel. If you have a question for just one member of the panel, you can come do that in chat. The Q&A is where it's at. Put it in there. We do DevOps Unbound every other week. We have fantastic panel discussions. But about once a month, we do these live roundtables. And the beauty of them is we really don't prepare a agenda. It's driven by you, the audience. So as we start discussing the future of CI/CD, your questions, your comments, your ideas will drive where we go here. So we will take it from there, and looking forward to your questions. Usually people put in the chat hello from wherever they are, and it's always good to see people from all over the world joining with us. So thank you for joining. Let us now introduce, though, our audience. So, our panel. Mitch has already introduced himself. Let me first start off with my friend Tracy Reagan, who's front and center on my screen. Anyway, Tracy, if you wouldn't mind maybe introduce yourself.
Absolutely. I am, first of all, before I do, thank you, Alan, for telling us or reminding us the difference between CI and CD, and we definitely see a shift to CD. We don't call it the CI/CD Foundation for a reason. I am Tracy Reagan. I am the co-founder and CEO of a startup called Deploy Hub. We are a microservice service catalog offering that is built into the CD pipeline. We also have an open source project that we contributed back to our favorite community, to the CD Foundation, and that was on December the 8th, and that is called Ortelius. So we are managing both of those. I have been around for some time. My first company was a company called OpenMake Software, and we had one of the first build management solutions. When I say build, I mean we were worried about the compile and link process because we were thinking about supply chain management a long time ago and dependencies. And if you wonder where we got the ideas around a microservice service catalog, all you have to do is look at your build output.
Great. Thank you, Tracy. Next up, we have Adam Erickillian. Adam has been with us on a few roundtables over the year. Adam, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, though.
Thank you, Alan. So my name's Adam Erickillian, and I work for a little company called Dell Technologies in their ISG division, and part of their DevOps and productivity engineering group. I'm also a professor at Boston University part-time and an ambassador to the DevOps Institute. So it's great to be here, and thanks for having me on again.
Fantastic. Thank you, Adam. Next up, I'd like to introduce you to Margaret Francis. Margaret, why don't you give us a little background?
Sure. My name is Margaret Francis, and I'm currently COO of Armory, which is perhaps best known for its distribution of open source Spinnaker. Before that, I ran Heroku over at Salesforce. So kind of like Tracy, I've been kicking around the problem of how one actually builds and deploys software so it's useful in the real world for a long time. And it's amazing to me how diverse the approaches are that people use to actually get from a commit to the customer. So it's interesting place to be.
Fantastic. Speaking of diverse, I just want to quickly comment how exciting it is to look out on this screen and see 3 women and 3 men discussing this topic. Okay.
About time.
Kudos to the team putting it together. Good stuff. Last but not least, though, let me introduce you to, and if I mispronounce your name, I don't know if it's Dana or Dana Roachman. Is that? How do you pronounce it?
It's Dana Roachman.
It is, yeah. Dana Roachman. All right. I'm sorry. It was 50-50. Dana, if you wouldn't mind a little bit about yourself.
Definitely. So first of all, I'm happy to be here. I'm VP of Product at Incredible. We've had Tommy, our CEO, participate with Alan a couple of times before. What we do at Incredible is accelerate software development life cycles from compilation to release, focusing a lot on CI as we see it as a vital part of developer velocity, and that's really something we're focusing on. I have, before that, over 20 experience in tech companies from R&D and product management. And again, super happy to participate here.
Thank you. And it's our pleasure to have you here, Dana. So, someone once said, if you don't learn your lessons from history, you're doomed to repeat the mistakes. So I think before we can really talk about the future of CI/CD, we should spend a little bit of time talking about kind of the history of CI/CD. I alluded to it, Tracy mentioned it, it was definitely CI was kind of the big dog, if you will, early on in DevOps, but things have changed. But Tracy, if it's okay with you, I'm going to appoint you group historian, and ask you if maybe you could start the conversation off with giving us a little bit of a history of CI/CD in the DevOps context. Ask the rest of the group to join in as you feel you have something to contribute.
Absolutely. It depends on how far back you want to go, because a lot of us think about CI as something that happened over the course of the last, I'd say, 15 years. But if you really, really want to, and I think history is important too, because you really can learn a lot from history. And if we look at how the mainframe did things, we would learn a lot even today. Endeavor actually stands for, which is a mainframe version management tool that does all the builds. It stands for Environment for Developers and Operations. And when I first started working in the software business, I fought Endeavor. They wanted to bring Endeavor in. I was like, no, I don't want to do that. But then when I learned I didn't have to worry about my own compile JCL, and I could just check something in, and after I checked it in, it would actually do a link edit step, look for all my dependencies, build a automated configuration management map that I could see what would happen, and then do a ship when it was ready and there was a quorum and people pushed that ship off. That was CI. And it was CD as well. And then we started recognizing that we went to the distributed side and we started scripting everything. And we still do. We script way too much. We are really, we have embedded ourselves in these imperative processes. And the scripting became a problem, and the person who was doing the build became a bottleneck. And so everybody at the same time, even though that Kosuke gets big credit for Jenkins, we were all doing something about that time when it came to check in your code and automatically run your build script, with the goal of making sure that we didn't divert our code base too far. We used to have a monthly sync up. Can you imagine doing that now? A monthly sync up to make sure all our code still compiled, and one poor person, and that oftentimes was me, had to figure out how to get the build to work, and you'd be there all weekend trying to figure out all the dependencies and learning a lot about the structure. That was not a very good way to produce a release candidate. So then we created this check-in and compile process. Check in, have a wait period, and compile. And that is what traditional continuous integration was all about, so that we knew that every day or every time somebody checked something in, it could compile, it didn't break the build, and we could move forward. And it wasn't necessarily about deploying it or releasing it. It was all about making sure we didn't break the build.
Well, one other thing, and also I think what's important there too is, at the time, we also didn't have customers who wanted instant gratification, or that, at least societally, that wasn't necessarily the norm, right? So our release windows were much larger, so we could have those monthly sync ups to be able to make sure everything was compiling and working, because we were on a yearly or 12 to 16 month release schedule in some cases. Whereas today, and I think the intersection of as a service, software as a service, for example, it directly coincides with our need for continuous deployment, right? And so when you begin to look at the historical correlations there, it's really quite interesting. And although we think about CD with typically software, CD is also very, very pervasive with embedded software running on hardware, for example, through IoT devices. And we're seeing a lot of trends from a CD perspective towards those directions, which is making us think about security, compliance, all of these other kinds of regulations, and how critical they become to the overall deployment of software.
I think also what's we can also be reminded that cloud is also something that was raised over the years, where a lot of these CI/CD processes are transformed into the cloud in the last couple of years, which also brought in all the velocity and security and all these issues that you've just mentioned, Adam.
Yeah, I kind of remember this tipping point too. Maybe it was in kind of your 15-year time horizon, Tracy, where we went from Friday at noon, we're doing the build, check on all your code, right? Because the build took hours, sometimes days, to complete. It was a thing, right? To this idea of, I think it's when we also got much better about using software version control, Git, things like that, where we could check out much smaller pieces, work on smaller pieces. And then all of a sudden we migrated, I think pretty quickly, it seems like that we migrated to this, we're going to do continuous integration. Okay. We just ramped up the RPM of how fast that happened. And of course, now it's just assumed that we do it that way, right? It's the norm. It's the standard.
Mitch, I'm going to completely date myself right now with
Okay.
the whole, like, do you remember when we had to get everybody to commit before we went to lunch?
Oh, yeah.
We were like, okay, we're going to do the build over lunch. What are we having for lunch today? Like everybody had, and everyone would be like trying to get the one person who's like hasn't like checked their code yet to get it in there so that we could do the build over lunch.
We're sitting in the car. Where's Alan? He's getting his commit done. He'll be here.
Yeah.
Like, we got to go to lunch. Where's Alan?
I was doing the build. I didn't go to lunch.
Well, and that's the thing about DevOps, Tracy, right? It's always that person who got stuck in the office, right, doing the last mile of the build. Well, everyone else was like, oh, well, we'll get Steve a burger. Like, it was like, and now it just seems so strange. Remember, don't deploy on Fridays.
Yep.
Do not deploy to production on Friday.
Oh, we always did, because then we had a full weekend to fix it.
By the way, that's still a rule. That's still a rule I follow. Don't deploy on Friday.
I was going to say so. But you know what, guys? So clearly we've had this DevOps revolution around CI to CD, but it's not just CI to CD, right? I think some of the things that hasten this evolution or external. Someone mentioned cloud. Certainly Kubernetes. To me, Kubernetes is what killed the radio star Jenkins, right? All of a sudden, Jenkins for CI and then CD was not a great solution in a Kubernetes environment. And you had Jenkins X and some other things popping up, but it created an opening for Spinnaker, quite frankly, right? And others. There's this whole new generation of, I call them CD tools, as well as next gen CI/CD tools that worked up. You could work in through Git, for instance, right? The whole GitOps thing that really natively integrated into Kubernetes and other cloud native technologies. And what that did is it spawned sort of an explosion, right? Like a Cambrian explosion of new life forms or recycled life forms, right? That has forever, I think, set the CI/CD world on a new course.
Completely new course, all the way from the build all the way to the deployment. I mean, we don't even, the thought of an 8-hour build is, they're still out there and they'll be out there for a while, but we don't do compiles anymore. We don't do compiling and linking in a microservices world. Links are done at runtime through APIs, and Python is interpreted. Your build is now creating a container image. That's your build.
Who broke the build? Sort of the who killed Kenny, who broke
who killed Kenny, exactly. That doesn't have to happen anymore.
We had incredible. We still see a lot of companies with really long builds. There's like million lines of code that we see. A lot of these kind of large companies. By the way, this is exactly what brought the developers who originally developed our product back in 2000 to help speed up these long builds. So we really come into wherever it's not microservices that take really small kind of amount of time to build. With Incredible, is exactly what kind of we come in to do. It makes sure that even these long tons of code projects take really short time to build. So to help get these companies as well to do short CI cycles as well.
And certainly microservices aren't going to be for everybody. Embedded systems are always going to have those big builds. But in terms of the broader, as Alan's pointing out, the direction that we're moving, and business agility, as Adam pointed out, has driven this from the very beginning. People want changes more frequently, and then we did agile, small incremental changes, and now microservices kind of that last mile, and that is where that really takes us almost full circle, to be quite honest, because now we're building this big cluster of small bounded context features, and collections of them make up an application. It's a very different world now, and workflows have to change. I'm super excited about events and CD. I'm super excited about the work that Armory's done around policies, because all of this is going to change, and what's going to end up happening is events and policies are going to replace a human creating a workflow. Workflows can then just be generated based on a risk value of a microservice, for example, and it could change. Today, we had it in a really fast workflow, went from development to a little bit of test out to production. It broke the last 5 times. The system's going to say, now you've got to go through a more stringent process. You're going to have gated approvals, and all that can be built around policies in an event-driven design, and it's going to revolutionize the way we see CI/CD.
Well,
it's going to revolutionize CD.
And especially as you begin to think about how IoT devices are much more pervasive, right? So these policies and compliance become that much more critical, because I can't just push an update to my automated car, right? Without having levels of compliance and the correct amount of testing, because it could perform some horrific crash and who knows, blow up the car, right? But even when you begin to think about in the healthcare sector, right, and we begin to see more IoT in healthcare. So as an example, something like a pacemaker that is sending information back to the cloud to determine, is this functioning as it should be, and is the patient okay? Oh, and by the way, it's not functioning okay. Let's contact the service that is monitoring me so that they can contact, God forbid, the police, because I'm having a potential heart attack and I need medical attention, right? I can't just do some unit testing and a couple of tests and shoot that out to the field. I need compliance and I need policies. And if organizations like Armory are providing that, I think that's really fantastic.
Adam, I got a lot of sympathy for people who are actually working in the hardware space and all this, because we have it so much easier than pure cloud, really do. But I think the forcing functions of CI/CD, I would categorize right now, it's exactly what you're talking about, Adam, in terms of like policy and security. People want to understand the supply chain. They want to have the appropriate human gate and the appropriate security control before things kind of get out to a place where they could, hurt a human or cause an autonomous car to do a wrong thing, or, bring down your app in production, whatever that might be. So there's a lot of focus right now in industry on security and kind of policy-driven deployments, for sure. But I actually think that's the most recent development, and there were 2 other ones that preceded it. And the first one is who broke the build one. It was quality. Like, how do I ensure the thing I'm releasing is actually functional and is not going to bring my business down? So this is sort of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Let's just make it safe, right at the bottom.
Right.
And then at Tracy, to your point, that forcing function of the business, that is completely what drives a lot of the Armory customers we have. They're like, we got to get code into production. We are shipping features. We are shipping new lines of business. We have broken up a monolith. It is now a set of microservices. We're doing super high scale deployments, thousands a week on the same application or set of services. And we need a machine to help us do that, right, with speed, because the business depends on it. And that frankly heated up during the pandemic. So those 3 things, is it functional? Does it follow our policies and our security, bar? Does it meet all those bars? And then thirdly, are we actually speeding the innovation to drive the business out the door? Or I would say the business reasons for engaging in CD more, even more than functionally, we may call the category something different, in 10 or 15 or 20 years, we'll have renamed DDF by then maybe, but it'll still be those same three driving functions that are putting pressure on our engineering teams.
Margaret, I completely, really completely agree with you. I think one of the things that we see as the keys are speed, getting things faster out there, but without really compromising on quality. You just want to make sure that, so Adam, you touched on kind of not just running one unit test, right? You want to make sure that you run all the tests that you can run as fast as possible and early as you can in the process. So these tests can be unit tests, but other integration tests, functional tests, it can be security. Everything you want to make sure that you run all this life cycle of this pipeline of everything that you need to make sure you don't compromise on quality, but you get things really fast out there with the security standards that you want. So yes, I think that's definitely the key is velocity on one hand, but not compromising on quality on the other hand. And I think cost is also something that's always out there, right? I mean, as a KPI, you want to make sure that you're also doing that in an effective cost at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Guys, I've got audience questions that we need to hit on. One was on, and Margaret brought it up, was around security. And of course, security is top priority for everyone and everything today. But Frank, wanted to know, how do you manage the security risk of CI/CD if you have someone developing who isn't aware of security policies? Can they blow a hole in the whole architecture? And yeah, they can. I think part of the whole CI/CD thing, though, in my mind, and maybe it's because I come from security, is that security is everyone's responsibility. That includes the developers who are developing code. That includes the DevOps team. It includes everyone, right? Security is everyone's responsibility. It's the security team's job, though, to make everyone aware of security policies. Right. And so when we think about security, I think, security is everyone's job, but the security people still have to define, disseminate, educate everyone about security policies. So Frank, I hope that answered your question and with some of the discussion around there. Yes.
Okay, I don't know why my mic wants to mute itself. Okay, I would just like to say, I don't think that any human developer can be aware of all of the security policies and vulnerabilities in a really big organization. We're at that point now where these are not even scale things to manage. And I'm in ML, right? I'm a data scientist. I'm trying to wrangle this Python app into production. I have no idea what networking policies I just, I might run afoul of, or what kinds of, data issues, data retention issues. It's just mind-bogglingly complex, honestly, to manage all of those things. So I think that we are looking kind of like with the state of autonomous cars, we're looking for the machine assist for the human operator every place that we can provide it. Hey, we automatically checked everything that we could. Hey, there's a manual policy check here for the thing that needed an Adam's eyes on it or a Tracy's eyes on it. We've got records and logs. When we make a goof, we know how to go back and instrument against it in the future. We are looking for the machine assist to help our application and service. And, it just, otherwise, I don't even know what my calendar is without looking at my phone. I don't know how anyone could retain all the security policies they got to write code to comply with.
Absolutely. The human has to be taken out of the equation. And there's a question out there about imperative and declarative, and will declarative be sustainable over time? And no, it won't. It just won't. We have to start taking the data that we're generating through the pipeline and applying it in an AI machine learning way. And there's no reason why we shouldn't. We're technologists. We should be able to do that. And part of the problem is because, as I said earlier, we are so embedded in our imperative scripts. Our builds are that way. Our workflows are that way. And, I've talked to companies about this question of security, and I ask them, how are you going to implement it? And they struggle because they have, hundreds of workflows that they have to go in and modify and add a security step to each one. Or they have to get better at the build script that they have for managing their supply chain that's going into their binaries. And all of this requires right now a human to sit there and tweak it and code it. And that will not support us. That is not sustainable. Even if it's now a declarative way, we still have to add that extra level that we take the human out of it and we use the data to determine what a particular microservice needs to do in terms of its workflow. The human we have to build it so the human doesn't have to do it.
I'm going to
because we'll get it wrong.
Narrative a little bit right now. I really will, because like I think that, what was git push Heroku master is now git push Heroku main was like a transcendent moment for me. And it happened when I was with my DevOps team at ExactTarget, trying to wrangle an early version of OSS Kafka into production. Like it was transformative. I love declarative development, and I love a lot of things about my former employer, Salesforce, and what it has done to democratize development. But I think that we're in a world of code. So declarative development is more about the help that it provides. It's about the best path, the fast path, the easy way, the prescriptive way to do it. I don't think declarative ever is really going to replace code. We're just all going to exist on this continuum where declarative should be an option and so should code. I don't know how else to say it.
What about low code, no code? That was another question, right? Where does low code, no code fit in this brave new world?
There are points on a spectrum where if you want to do the simple thing and there's a declarative interface to do it, great. If that works for you, do it. But it's not going to work for everyone.
Right. And when you
it's definitely not going to work for the larger companies out there, but for the smaller ones, it's there, and I think it does not contradict everything that we're saying right now, because even these low code, no code give the infrastructure. They also need to give you the infrastructure that we're talking about, right? About keeping up with the security and fast releases and everything that we've been talking about. So I think it's just kind of a complementary thing to the discussion.
But it comes back to some of those pillars that we were talking about earlier: security, quality, speed, right? And so when you begin to think about how we can begin to leverage data from a machine learning perspective, and if we peel back on what we're really building from a CI/CD perspective, it's a manufacturing pipeline, and we're producing widgets that get delivered, and we're collecting data as we go. Well, if we apply that to something around test, for example, if I make a code change in a specific area, I don't need to blast my 30,000 tests at it because they're not even relevant, right? So I can learn that certain code changes require certain tests and be much more precise around what I'm testing, why I'm testing it, and it shifts us from that notion of declarative to I would call it a low code, no code environment where we're not telling the system to blast these 30,000 tests at it. You know what? I made these changes. Let's test let's run these 500 tests against that to qualify those changes and be much more tactical and precise. And it drives quality, security, and speed much more efficiently and effectively. And you know what? As an engineer and as a developer, I don't have to do anything. The machine does it for me.
One of the things I think you're kind of touching on, we all are, when you brought in low code, no code too, is you can think about one stream of work, right? One pipeline of work on a dev team. Most of us live in a world where to get something out in production, there's a mobile app, there's a backend, there's a database, there's a mainframe, there's something else. It's synchronizing and working across multiple streams, pipelines of work, and synchronization of those release. They don't all have to necessarily go out at once, but there's often parallel going on at the same time. So you can't do that without automation. Unless you're going to have a big meetup every half hour to say, are we ready to go do the next thing? It seems to me that's part of the world we're moving into, if we're not in already, is really figuring out how to do that effectively, efficiently, because that's what the business needs. That's what they need it out there, and they assume mobile's a push button, right? Just a feature, turn it on, and their agile planning software, and it's all good.
Adam, and also Mitch, what you were touching, I think that there's basically it's a question where you are, in what part of the cycle you're on. There's some points in that running only these 500, a subset of the test is enough. There's points that you want to make sure that you run all of the tests that you have, and the key here again is being able to do either by automation, so you understand exactly what this point in time is, and in the background you get either these 500 run or all the 30,000 tests run, which is exactly, I mean, we see this all the time with customers at Incredible, that they companies that do want to make sure that they can run all the tests and make sure that the quality is high, and especially in industries like you were talking about, embedded healthcare, IoT devices, where you want to make sure automotive kind of, you want to make sure that you're very much not compromising the quality. So this is exactly the automation that we're doing to make sure that you're able to parallelize all the tests and basically run all these 30,000 tests, but in a very fast time. So that's
and keep track of the state of your system, right? Like, I mean, all of us are basically all of the kind of, panelists on this are basically involved in creating automation that helps DevOps people, the people who are not just responsible for getting the code into production, but for keeping the business alive, the business that depends on technology alive, by monitoring the state of that system and making sure that it stays whole. Even when like a more atomic test has passed, we don't know how everything will kind of behave necessarily in the wild, and how, like, this is why the service catalog work is really interesting, Tracy, that you're focused on, because this is actually hard, and I feel that we're at the beginning of the tooling journey. We're at the beginning of the tooling journey. We are not mature. Like that Cambrian explosion you were talking about, Alan, is like, we're going to keep building tech until we get better at this, and we're going to take a diversity of approaches to doing it and trying to figure out what the DevOps tool chain looks like, right? Because overlooking the complexity of the poor, usually dude, who got left in the office to run the production build over lunch, and everyone else would bring him back pizza or whatever, is like, it's a little bit of an unsung hero profession still.
Mm-hmm.
It's a profession that should go away. I did it for years. That's not the right job for anybody.
You wouldn't wish it on your worst enemy.
But I would not. It's a really hard job, and it is unsung. There was a question out here, and I just want to touch base on it about blockchain, not to change the subject, but
it's a good question.
It's a really great question, and the community at Artilius has been thinking about how to use the blockchain technology to build the dependency maps across microservices, which could be a really, really very cool implementation of blockchain, because you then have a complete audit trail of every single one that's changed and all of the dependencies. I mean, we're working hard to create these massive dependency maps, but they are really big in a microservices world. They can get really complex. So blockchain is definitely something that we could see in CI/CD. And then there's another one about just what in general is going to change about CI/CD as we move forward. I always tell people to start looking and putting money into these areas. Learn domain-driven design. Start understanding what that means from an application construction. We need to be able to manage, the DevOps teams are going to be responsible for managing sprawl of microservices. The sooner you understand domain-driven design, the better. Think about, a lot of the companies are thinking that they have to move away from a mono repo into a poly repo. Not necessarily true. That is part of the whole world of a service catalog. You track it where it's at in the service catalog, and you don't have to take the time to reconstruct your entire GitHub environment. Number 3, the CI/CD pipeline is going to be, when you think about microservices, it has to consider tracking the changes and the versions. We have to be able to think about that. And the final one that I always push is we really have to get out of imperative structures of our workflow itself. And events and policies will be the way forward. So if you're going to put your money anywhere right now, I would say put it in learning domain-driven design, because it is going to be the way we manage our artifacts. It is how we're going to see the world in the future.
Fair enough. There was a question in Q&A from Rao around, how relevant is it to follow sort of service management principles, right? ITSM, ITIL, stuff like that. And I know, look, there's a world where they coexist, and then there's many people in the DevOps space who kind of laugh, and say that's dinosaur stuff. But how relevant are, tried and proven service management best practices in this new CI/CD
They're changing they are definitely changing as well. But if you ever sit on the support side of the house and you get a ticket open on an application that's no longer working and you have no idea why, and then somebody from who's doing observability says, well, it looks like it's this microservice, you don't know anything about that microservice. You don't know who to call. You don't know where it's been installed. So all of that is still extraordinarily relevant. It just is changing. It's just shifting. It's all the same, but it's different, right? It's just a little different in how we perceive things, because now we're managing tiny little functions. I mean, if you look at Netflix, I think they have something in the ballpark of 5,000 microservices. That's a lot of pieces and parts that manage all of the different applications that are running in that we all use when we go watch your favorite show on Netflix. So yes, ITSM will still be important. It is not a dinosaur. It is becoming more critical as we break up our applications, and we have to have ownership information.
To that point, Tracy, we're all to go ahead, Adam.
I was just gonna say, I'd even say it's relevant further left too, because if you're using tools that are up and down, and your pipeline in and of itself is unreliable, and you can't, on the integration side, you can't integrate on a continuous basis, that's a major problem too. So if I can't even get to the deployment stage, because my infrastructure doesn't have the right change management associated with it, it's going to be useless to me. So I think it starts there and goes all the way through to the deployment piece as well. So I agree with you.
And there's names too. We like to change the labels up and come up with new ways of doing the old thing that represent the modern way to do it, right? So it's like, now, do we need DevOps or do we need SRE? And
SRE.
On all of our services? Right. So when there's an incident, we don't roll back, we roll forward.
Yeah.
Things based on those SLIs and SLOs. So I think that terminology changes, but there's no way to get a handle on this without machines now. Like in the microservices world, there's no way. Like if there's 5,000 microservices, you've got to know the state of all the things. And then you have to have a picture of the health of the overall system, where you see big customers of Armory or big players in the industry like a Netflix using approaches like canary deployments and blue-green or red-black and the Netflix terminology, right, where they're like, we are testing the health of the entire application right now, and we will quantify that health, and we will make decisions on how we're deploying based on the health of that overall application or system comprised of these many services that we have like the metrics on. So I'm still using the words rollback and incident because when an incident occurs, you're in one. Yep. You are in an incident, and you are going to have to work it.
And there's another group that's starting to at the CNCF, the application delivery SIG. They're starting to talk about cooperative delivery, because now a microservice is going to have its own database, right? Potentially. So we're going to have to now include in the pipeline this understanding that there are many moving parts. It's not just the application, but it's the infrastructure, it's the database, and it's the application. And they've called that cooperative delivery. And I think it's an appropriate discussion to be having right now as we break these things up. And Margaret, remember, you guys are the Netflix people. You know a lot about Netflix. Do you have any idea how many environments they have that those 5,000 microservices are running in? How many clusters? They have to have They have to have a lot of clusters. That's just one cluster, right?
Yeah. It's funny, Tracy, I would have said when you were saying, okay, like what things to learn, I actually would have said Kubernetes. I would have said that we're now at the point with Kubernetes where it's like in a weird state where like most customers I talk to are using it. They're not using it exclusively, but it has become important enough now, that it's a thing that everybody is going to have to do, if not master, be able to work with. I don't know if other people on this panel are seeing the same.
Oh, I think Kubernetes is incredibly
for sure.
important. Yeah.
Yeah, but also you can see that with a lot of these management tools that are built for improving Kubernetes work, and you see the focus there is out there. So that's definitely something we also see a lot of growing usage with that. I think that the conversation that we had about, like, Margaret, I really related to what you were talking about. It's like people were afraid that kind of machine learning or AI will change, will make the people irrelevant. It does not. It just changes what you expect the people in the process to do. And I think it's very similar to what we're seeing with these buzzwords with the CI/CD world. At the end of the day, like it's changing and it's evolving. But the outcome is the same outcome that you want to make sure that you get, right? So all of this getting the shift left to developers or booting in security, it's all improving. The outcome is the same. We want to make sure we release fast. Again, it goes back to the speed, quality, security, cost, all of the things that we want to maintain. We're just doing it in a better way.
And that's why GitOps is becoming such a big conversation, right? GitOps is I was introduced into this world through IAC. Have one place to define what your infrastructure looks like. Now, operators are being applied to a lot of things. We'll probably have an operator for our CI/CD pipeline.
Absolutely. Guys, I got to bust in here because we're past the quarter two. I want to quickly mention the 4 Amazon gift card winners for today are Jennifer E., Siram N., David C., and Orla S. Excuse me. Our behind-the-scenes team will reach out to you and get you those gift cards. So congratulations. Back to questions, though. So we hit
really
the one.
Questions here, Alan.
There's crazy questions here. So you hit one that I just marked answer, Tracy, and let's go to the value stream on GitOps, but let's go to VSM, value stream management. Huge impact lately. We're hearing it all over the place here at DevOps.com. What's the effect of that? How does that play in CI/CD?
I wish someone would rename it. I think it's a terrible name for a set of technologies that we're using to build and deliver software. And thank you, Gartner, for trying to phrase it in a way that encompassed everything that you want to put in it. But if someone has a streak of poetry in them, help Gartner rename that.
Yeah, no, they have a history of with those names. But you're right. I mean, because really, the more I speak, and Helen Beal, who's part of our team here at MediaOps DevOps Institute, is the chair for the Value Stream Management Consortium, and they much prefer the term flow, right? It's the flow of your development, the flow of your deployments, and how you're doing it. Of course, that doesn't lend itself to a great name either. But you're right; it's a bad name, but it's a real thing. Right.
Yeah, I mean, and value stream is going to have to, like the rest of us. I mean, value stream needs to be out there to really. It's really, I would say it's the guard dog of our CI/CD process, right? It's going to
Yeah.
report on stuff that we're not doing right. So it's super critical to really all of our KPIs and really understanding if we're actually achieving what we had set out to do. In the microservices world, it actually becomes, in my opinion, more important. If somebody writes a microservice, they deploy it. Is anybody using it? When does it, what was there a reason why we pushed it out there? So I think that value stream, as it is today, because it works on at an application level, right? It's monitoring at the application level. It's going to have to change in order to be able to work in a service-oriented architecture, and it's going to have to be able to judge things. It's going to have to do its work based on a microservice as opposed to an application. Now, the application still is important and that data is still important, but it's going to have to drive down a little deeper to really determine if that microservice developer who's writing this collection of microservices, is it getting out in the proper time, and is it serving the community that it's intended to? So there's work, I think, that the value stream community needs to kind of start digging in and really understanding where they now fit in a Kubernetes model.
Yeah. So Martin in the audience, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Dana, you go.
Yeah, I like the flow that you've mentioned. I think at the end of the day, it's a flow and it's a matter of feedback. So quick feedback on everything that's developed. So Tracy, you were talking about microservices, which I completely agree. Feedback is important, even if it's microservices or not. Quicker feedback into whether what you're developing is being used, whether it's doing damage, whether anything else is more important to invest the time. The KPIs are met. At the end of the day, it's flow and quick feedback. So I completely relate with the kind of your phrasing of flow.
Interestingly, Martin in the audience, who seems to be he's our VSM champion. He says that VSM represents the implementation of the 3 ways of DevOps, right? Sort of from Phoenix Project. And then he says it's flow, feed, and experimentation in continuous, I assume, integration or delivery. Thoughts on that, Adam? What do you think?
Well, I mean, I totally agree with Tracy, actually. The generality of what it comes back to is basically workflow management and monitoring our workflow, and that's what value stream management is. And now we're just getting down to a more granular level of monitoring our value stream, especially as we begin to get more granular architecturally with microservices. And you think about it's in tandem with the generality of system architecture as we progressed over the years. We've had 3-tier architectures, we've had SOA, we've got microservice and event-based architectures today, workflow management. And in order to facilitate workflow management, whatever you want to call it, whether it's value stream management or workflow management or XYZ management, it needs to get granular enough as our architectures have changed over the years. So, I do agree with Tracy on this one for sure. And I think it's absolutely a critical aspect to understanding, what value are we providing to the customer, but more so, are we building the right things for our customers, and do they really need them? And at the end of the day, that's what a workflow management system is for. And as we progress and jump into this new microservice-based world using Kubernetes, we're going to have to get more granular there as well.
Excellent. You know what, Brian Dawson, I don't know if it's my friend Brian Dawson from Linux Foundation or
Probably
not.
is.
But Brian, to put the bow on the value stream conversations, says, where does it sit in terms of adoption? Is it still aspirational, or are we seeing real world? I lost it. Are we seeing real world applications and outcomes? Margaret, what do you think?
I think I got the question, but if the question is whether or not we're really using these technologies to birth commercial applications into the world, question, like not even close. Like if you really need to innovate, like particularly for the consumer or retail or media market, financial services, anything like that, you must use these more machine-driven approaches to getting your code all the way from the check-in to the checkout, so to speak. Like you got to do it. It is an imperative. What we are talking about now in the industry, what Tracy's working on, Dana's working on, what we're working on is how you actually get it done in the best possible way. And I would say jury's out. Jury's out. There's no like referendum where we're like, yeah, everyone should do it this way. You use a GitHub action to fire off your, like, we are not done figuring it out as an industry. There's just like a lot of different approaches, and we haven't fully standardized yet. It's a great time to be working in the industry because you get to shape like what happens. Yep. But we don't have that consensus. So, I mean, I appreciate conversations like these and gatherings like these, because as we begin to drive more towards the best flow, the best consensus, the best tool chain, like we're going to standardize around a number of approaches, and then there'll be a next frontier. I would have said that for people who are on this call, if any of you are in data science or are in, ML ops, like I feel for you. Like at least with application development, we got a head start, but there's like a lot of work to do, the data side of the house still, whether it's deploying stateful applications or whether it's wrangling big data sets or productionalizing, kind of data science models. Like,
I have a thought on the value stream management. In our industry, we've all been through some cycles like this, and sometimes these things rise, kind of pop up, and some of them turn into something, some of them really are a thing, and others either fade away or become kind of a feature of what products might do. What's interesting to me about value stream management is the why, right? I don't know if it's a product, I don't know if it's a thing yet, but the why is people want to know, the business wants to know, if I put money in here and ask for these things, am I going to get something out the other end that closely resembles that? And when is that going to happen? That's the real value, right? We're creating value for the customer, for the business, for employees, for whatever it might be, society, for nonprofit. That's the real need. So I kind of get less hung up about value stream management as a thing and more of a, how do we make sure we can elicit it, get information, data, as you're talking about, Margaret, to be able to help answer those questions, rather than yet another IT thing that the rest of the business goes, I have no idea what that is, but I need my software. It's late.
Yeah.
Standardization will definitely become an issue at the end. A lot of the things are even homegrown at the moment. I mean, people are solving their own challenges in a way that they need it. So that's definitely going to be something. Again, I touched it at the beginning. I think cloud will also really help with standardization, because a lot of the tools are just generally available on the cloud. So if we really solve the issue of cost, which we're trying to do by really kind of orchestrating the machines that you need to operate the CI. And if we find a way to enable these these organizations to go on the cloud, I think that will very much help with standardization that Margaret, you were referring to. So.
Fair enough. Guys, it's 3 minutes left. One area that's been sitting out in Q&A, there was a question from Geeta about would 100% automation improve the CI/CD process? I think there's a threshold question. Do we even want 100%? Is it possible? And if it was possible, would we even want it?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, we want it. And it's not possible with the tooling we have today. Okay, that is a given. But as the events in CD starts building out, we maybe create standard listeners. We start really building out maybe a standard policy. We can automate a whole lot of this stuff. We can make it even better than we have today. I know that sounds crazy because we all love our CD pipelines that we've worked so hard to build, but we can do better. And I know that we will. I think looking at some of the new tooling around, event-based CD is a good place to start understanding where this is headed. Get involved in the event SIG. Anybody on this call, if you're interested in any of these topics, you can get involved in the CD Foundation's special interest groups. Get involved in the event SIG. Get involved in the CNCF's cooperative delivery or their application delivery SIG. There's a GitOps SIG. If you want to learn more about GitOps, you can do that. But all of these are pushing to 100% automation. That is the exact direction that we're going. We are trying to automate as much as we can, because the future has a lot of small features being pushed out to production, and we can't do it with humans anymore. Humans are going to have other jobs to do. So the CI/CD pipeline, it has to be automated, and we have to get as close to 100% as possible. We might have gated approvals, and that might make a manual step. So we'll say 98%.
At the end of the day, making it more automated will just help us bring in new things that we're not even thinking of today, and we don't have time to work on because we're dealing with things that can be automated. So working on automation will just help us bring in more into these pipelines. So
great. Guys, we are at the top of the hour. First of all, what a fantastic killer panel. Margaret, Dana, Tracy, Mitch, Adam. Great job, guys. But even better than our panel was our audience. What a great, man. We had great interactivity here. We had people answering other people's questions. We had a ton of questions. I tried to get to as many as possible. I love these roundtables, and this is why when they work like this, they're great. Catch us next month for another live roundtable on DevOps Unbound. Be sure to check out the regular panel shows every other week. I think there's one coming up next week, which we recently recorded. Check that out. Many thanks to Tricentis for their sponsorship. Thanks to everyone out there. We're out. This is Alan Schimmel for Media Ops. Take care, everyone.
thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.